Hey, what is going on, Los Angeles? It's J. Tita, and today is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. And on this day, I want to talk to you a little bit about this very special documentary that I just so happened to have catch over the weekend, none other than Dia Khan's White Right Meeting the Enemy. And the reason I want to talk about this is because as we get into the fall season and as the sun sets earlier and earlier by the day, it seems, to me, it's definitely kind of that time of year to kind of settle in and catch a flick or two. Definitely some scary movies, especially if you're into those, and even if you're not. And then to catch a documentary or two, including one like Dia Khan's White Right Meeting the Enemy, because of how urgent it is, and also because of honestly how badass and provocative it is in such an important way. And I think that to understand a little bit of the urgency, we can just place a couple of things into consideration, including the fact that the President of the United States at this time, Donald Trump, was elected to office basically because of his and his team's position against immigration, because of his and his team's continual kind of gesturing towards white nationalism, and because of the policies that he and his team have enacted over the last 270 some days that they've been in office all across the United States from New York to Los Angeles in an effort to make good on this anti immigrant, anti woke agenda of theirs. And so, to think a little bit about that, even before we get into White Right Meeting the Enemy, which we're not going to sort of watch in full together, but which I'm going to play the opening clip of and maybe some more just to be sure that you get like a cool preview. I've got just a couple of excerpts from an article published on the New York Times just earlier today. And I have them here. I'll pop the first one up from this article that is all about Trump and his team's interest in absolutely overhauling the current sort of immigration process, the immigration and asylum process in the United States, in favor of white people and to the expense or at the expense of non white people. Because, I mean, I don't know if that doesn't tell you what the administration is interested in at this point and at this juncture in their administration or in their time in office, then I don't know what else does. So let's get into the first excerpt for a second here to really consider this, to kind of, yeah, lay the groundwork here. The article states that, quote, the Trump administration is considering a radical overhaul of the U.S. refugee system that would slash the program to its bare bones while giving preference to English speakers, white South Africans, and Europeans who oppose migration, according to documents obtained by the New York Times. The proposals, some of which have already gone into effect, would transform a decades old program aimed at helping the world's most desperate people into one that conforms to Trump's vision of immigration, which is to help mostly white people who say they're being persecuted while keeping the vast majority of other people out. The article continues. The proposed changes would put new emphasis on whether applicants would be able to assimilate into the United States, directing them to take classes on, quote, American history and values, unquote, and, quote, respect for cultural norms, unquote. The proposals also advise Mr. Trump to prioritize Europeans who have been, quote, targeted for peaceful expression of views online, such as opposition to mass migration or support for populist political parties, unquote. And yeah, I got to take a deep breath on this one for a second because it was just like a day or so ago that a friend of mine shared this screenshot of the Department of Homeland Security or so announcing the revocation of a number of people's visas for expressing their content online over the assassination of Charlie Kirk just a few weeks ago at the rally he was present at, or the rally he and his team were spearheading over in Utah. And so it's interesting to think a little bit about how the Department of Homeland Security is making it clear that it's watching a lot of what people are saying online, including not just what people said about Charlie Kirk's murder and how people reacted, but also what people in places such as Europe, in a place like, I don't know, Hungary, where folks have expressed adamant opposition to non white people making their way into their country. So the administration is clearly online a lot, even. They probably, um, they were probably on this article the moment it dropped. Someone was, for sure, because there's definitely somebody out there scouring the web for uh, anything and everything so much as uttered about the administration's policies and how it's faring so far, how the Trump administration is looking in the eyes of voters, not just in the rural states or the red states or the conservative states, but certainly in the blue states, in places like New York and California and Chicago and so on. And it's interesting because in this article alone, you can see that the administration is interested in providing protected status, basically, and even a pathway to citizenship, but only to people who are white, only to people based out of Europe, the European nations noted, and South Africa, apparently. And so, what's really mind boggling for a second there is that the Trump administration and their personnel are saying that they'll facilitate a migration process for people who actually oppose migration and an influx of immigrants to their country over here to the United States instead. So, guess what? It's clear that Trump, in his derangement syndrome and sort of early stage dementia, and that Stephen Miller, the sort of like classic villain, classic comic book villain, as Kalkulinski has pointed him out to be, it's clear that they really kind of consider themselves the final vanguard of the white the white race, or the like white people period, white people all over the world. Clearly they think not only that white people are under attack, not just in the United States, but also across Europe. Clearly they've like victimized themselves from the west to the east in this scenario. But they also think that they're going to essentially fight back all the way to the dawn of the early 20th century, I believe. So when the United States was sort of just finding its way, just finding its footing, really, as a global nation, particularly as this nation for white manifest destiny to kind of take it to the next level. That is, of course, until World War One and World War Two um, provided these kind of major hurdles for those nationalists over in Europe who thought they could take that same ideology and make it work. I mean, obviously, even then, even in World War One and World War Two, you had people in power who organized societies around this logic of attacking and destroying the other because it was the other who was responsible for the degradation and the sort of apathy that they found all across their nations, right? Like there had to be some reason that Germany was doing so poorly, not just through the First World War, but also in the aftermath. And surely it had to be all these Jewish people who were assimilating into the culture, right? And so it's interesting to think about this because Jewish people in the United States and even Jewish people in Israel, if they're even remotely studied up on the sort of levers that led to the First and Second World War, they should be able to see very clearly that there actually is no there actually is no like final test you can pass to finally assimilate when you are otherized by fascist systems of power. They know that very well, knowing that they had relatives who made their lives in, say, Europe at some point, only to see that their assimilation wouldn't be enough in the final analysis once the right fascist came into power. And so this is exactly what we have in the United States now is a set of fascists who have taken power and who are looking to use every single lever at their disposal to destroy diversity in the United States and across Europe, and to essentially manufacture a new course of history where a so called racial group, which makes up less than 10% of the global population, can kind of just reverse it all and take it all the way, you know, get that touchdown. Maybe even by taking a couple of slaves with them along the way, or then some. And that's what it is. That's what it is because a theory of fear directs its anger at anyone who fits the profile of the other. And you'll see this anytime that like Stephen Miller gets on TV to be interviewed about the administration's policy anywhere, right? You can like observe this seething anger. Even at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, Miller's speech was just seething anger, just like casting blame, just like grinding his teeth, just like oozing with animosity towards the other, towards the darkness, to use his own words. And so that's really because these folks have come to believe wholeheartedly that they're in an existential battle, and that diversity, which is why they go after DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, this tiny phrase that just absolutely outrages them. And that's why they go after it to the extent they do everywhere. I think I saw something on the New York Times as I browsed for a second on it as well, that like this project through the Hudson River that's been kind of in the making for the last 20 years is also now on hold because the administration is reviewing DEI initiatives that may be a part of the package for it. And so it's because these folks really have come to believe in white supremacy in the way that people do about a religion, in the way that people do about like the question of the purpose of life or the meaning of life, right? They have come to understand themselves as fighting a war against the erasure of, once again, the so called white race. And so it's because of that that I think a documentary like Dear Hans is more important than ever now for folks to check out. This documentary was published in 2017, and it was filmed kind of in the year prior to that, just as Donald Trump was getting elected to office. And it features none other than Dia Han's bravery on full display for anyone and everyone to see. Because not only did this woman kind of go out of her way to interview white supremacists between the years of maybe 2015 through 2017 to learn about their thinking, not only did she do that, but she documented the process from one living room to the next, from one rally to the next, from one training ground to the next. And so she really got all the way in their faces, to be clear, to study just how they arrived to this logic of white supremacy, which again, the President of the United States and Stephen Miller and Pete Hegseth and even Peter Thiel and even Elon Musk are all subscribed to. So the impetus then is on those of us outside of that theory, outside of that paradigm, or those of us right in the firing line of what this kind of thinking can lead to in our cities and in our communities, and what it is in fact kind of increasingly leading to in our cities and our communities across the nation and across the world at that. The impetus is on us to see just how they got there and how we might get some of them, likely not all of them, out of there. Because, of course, these folks make their way to office. They make their way to office mostly on promises that they can't keep, but on words that sound great at the time, such as the white right or such as white power. Because, hey, you know what? As a nation, we got a lot of soul searching that we have yet to do, and that we don't really have the tools for on a broader level quite yet, but that we do have an inkling of hope for because of documentaries like Dia Han's White Right Meeting the Enemy. So without further ado, let me just play the opening clip for you so that you can get a sense of what this is about, and I'll make a couple of comments and leave the rest to you, because I think that's how we're going to get it done this evening and for this installment. So let's go all the way to the beginning for White Right Meeting the Enemy. And here we go.
My hair okay? It's not flying around in funny directions?
So as you know, I am a woman of color.
Yes.
Yes. I am the daughter of immigrants. I am a Muslim. I am a feminist. I am a lefty liberal.
I wouldn't have
I
ever
see your
guessed.
face. And what I want to ask you is, am I your enemy?
You're not subjectively my enemy, but what you are promoting will lead to the disappearance of my people and my culture. And I will tell you this, it annoys me tremendously when I'm told by some immigrant or a child of immigrants that the only reason my country is worthwhile is because people like them have come here. It's as if to say, my ancestors built a dung heap.
Worthwhile. But hey, go off.
And I don't doubt your goodwill, but your goodwill is objectively going to lead to the oblivion of my people. I'm sorry, there is no other way to see it.
My name is Dia Khan. I'm an activist and filmmaker. When I was 6 years old, my father took me to my first rally against racism and fascism. I grew up in Norway, where white skinhead gangs terrorized our small Muslim community. My father told us things would change, but extremism and racism are on the rise again in Europe and America. I decided to meet people who think the white race is under threat and that I am their enemy. I met neo-Nazis.
Jews and homosexuals, they should be exterminated, every single one of them.
History will decide who is superior.
Men who say they've lived lives of racist violence.
Nigger, prepare to burn. You've attacked our people, and now it's your turn. I've hurt people horrifically with my bare hands.
I've been to prison, I've kidnapped people, I've harmed people. I've done things that you would think I'm insane.
And I sat down with the new leaders of the white nationalist movement, men from privileged and elite backgrounds.
We did it. We took it. We took it with force. We won.
Shame! Shame on all of you! Shame!
I joined the extremists on the front lines of the race wars in America. I wanted to see if I could understand their anger, to get to know the personal reasons why they are drawn to such hatred and division.
Fuck you!
So it's interesting to think a little bit about how in 2017, these years were now the early years. These years were the foundation, the kind of, yeah, the opening stages of what is now a vastly more powerful, vastly more weaponized white supremacist state and country at that. Because it was just earlier this month that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth in particular um, rounded up US generals, US war generals from across the world in Virginia to talk about an enemy within and to talk about how US cities could be training grounds for what they're going on to call the Department of War without the US Congress actually approving that um, phrasing of it or that rebranding of it, just to be sure. And uh, and to use this department and its resources, which I believe are funded at nearly a trillion dollars a year at this point, certainly uh, due in large part as well to the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill, which is just a nightmare on steroids for communities of color across the nation, um, to basically let these generals know that, hey, we're going to start sending you out now, and we're going to start having you watch over these cities the same way that the Gestapo in 1930s Germany would eventually do for Jewish communities and Jewish people across the German state and in the cities and nations they'd invade just as well. And it's interesting, it's scary because to think that this is 2017, to think that nearly 10 years later, the Department of Homeland Security is looking into overhauling its immigration and asylum process to prioritize white people. This is all you need to know about how the ideology evolves from this kind of clown show, this laughable and really like unserious set of events, the same way that like people laughed at Donald Trump when he first announced his candidacy for the US presidency from Trump Tower to begin with. It's interesting to think about how, yeah, like it really is fun and games for a moment before it becomes like this threat to the actual national security and not the national security that Pete Hegseth's office refers to, but the actual national security of people everywhere, be they people of color or not, because an attack on any one of us is an attack on all of us, which this documentary will also make clear for you, by the way. And so I highly recommend it just based on the opening alone, as you see that Dia Han really went out of her way and placed her life on the line in front of these people before any of it was popular to do, right? I mean, even now in the age of TikTok and in the age of IG Reels and in the age of kind of going out of one's way for virality, to go viral, that is. To think that Dia Khan was doing this back in 2017, not looking for likes and simple affirmations, but looking to educate herself as well as her audience, as well as those who would be opposed to her about just what was going on with the white nationalist movement in 2017. That's all you need to know, especially given where we are in 2025. And if we're going to be in a better place by, say, 2033 or 2030 at that, right? Because it might have taken 8 years for the white nationalist movement to fully seize control of everything from the Department of Education to the Department of Defense to funding initiatives or UNESCO, that is like clear and important, clearly important resources for um, people not just in the United States but also abroad, people dependent on U.S. support for critical reasons or for absolutely justified reasons. To think that these folks can now send ICE agents to Los Angeles and Chicago and New York, and to think that they are studying the movements and actions of people online as much as they are. Guess what? It took 8 years. It took 8 years, which is what about an administration tends to take anyway, right? It already took one sort of full administration for the movement to get this far. But if it's allowed to advance any further, there's no telling just where we'll be in 2033, because though it's never been kind of more justifiable to look at what's taking place in the United States in the 2020s in comparison to what took place for Germany through the 1930s. Though it's never been a better time to compare the two, it should be noted that the state, that is, the state here in the US, is far more powerful than Nazi Germany could ever imagine being, right? Like the United States is an empire with military bases across the globe. The United States is a military power with drones and personnel in every state you can name, because they've found a way, because that's what empire is and does. And to think then that this administration, which adheres to white supremacist logic, is again absolutely hell bent on supposedly defending the white species from extinction. That's all you need to know to be not only alarmed, but to be motivated to fight back in some meaningful way, shape, or form. And hey, if fighting back just means informing yourself for a moment so that you can see how folks kind of arrived to this movement historically and just where they tend to end up through such lines of thinking, then hey, I absolutely recommend Dia Khan's White Right Meeting the Enemy to do just that with. And I recommend it because hey, it's never been a better time to use that information to inform others and to empower yourself in one way, shape, or form. As I heard it said recently, to be informed is to be forewarned. And this is exactly what that is. The documentary was published in 2017, and I didn't know about it then. I didn't know about Han's portfolio at that time. But now, even while it's 8 years later, I still think it's a great starting point, not just for someone like me who's been looking at this kind of policy for quite a while, like on my own time and through my own research at this point, but for anyone out there who just wants to get started or to find a way into that conversation with a few facts on the ground for reference. So I recommend it. It's less than an hour long. It's on YouTube, on Dia Han's YouTube channel. You will absolutely find a link for that on the show notes for this installment of the podcast. And once you check it out, recommend it to someone else that you know, right? Like, let as many people see this documentary as can be. Because, as I mentioned to my friends after checking this out for myself over the past weekend, Dia Han, at least at the time of this installment of the podcast, has about 10,000 followers on YouTube when really she should have 10 million for the incredible work that she has published for us all to see. So go ahead and check it out. Let your people know. Let the city know because it's J. T.